Welcome to the Mixorcist.
Welcome to the Mixorcist.
Welcome, guys. How you been?
How you been? You've been.
We got some exciting stuff today, right?
Oh yeah, always. But you know, some things are legendary, and you're going to see that. But have you been watching anything, Chris, lately?
You know what? Because it's Christmas time, I've been stuck watching like Hallmark Christmas movies with the family, so I haven't done a ton of horror, although that in itself is pretty horrible. But we've talked about Behind the Monsters, so the latest issue, and probably the last for this season, is Pinhead. So check it out if you haven't seen that already. Beyond that, I haven't watched a ton of movies. You know, Shudder has been doing this thing where they're releasing all these old vintage kind of crappy movies. And Shudder's cool because it does reviews, like user reviews. So everything that comes up is bad. It's like, this sucks, don't waste your time. And when I read that, I'm like, I don't want to waste my time. How about you?
Well, I've been getting in the Christmas spirit, and I've got a bunch of stuff on the list to watch. So because we're getting closer, so Christmas classics like Silent Night, Deadly Night, Black Christmas.
Yeah.
What else have we got there? I mean, there's there are movies that like a tradition of horror movie, Christmas movies. Gremlins would be one of them, I guess.
Yes.
Like I found this whole list, and I just like sort of saved it. So I'm gonna get to some of these ones that I haven't seen. But there's a lot of Christmas movies that people don't necessarily think of as Christmas movies, but they are. So Trading Places, Christmas movie.
Die Hard.
Lethal Weapon, Eyes Wide Shut, Christmas movie.
Yep.
Also Hellbound, though I will recommend. That's not a Christmas thing, but
true. Check
out the series Hellbound. It's crazy. The shows and the movies coming out of South Korea. Also, like a lot of the art and the poetry as well. But it probably was always good, but it's just getting this worldwide exposure now, and it's just amazing. So stuff like Hellbound, Squid Game. There's one called My Name that I checked out. Also, they're all like just solid entertainment, and the list goes on.
Yeah, I mean, blood looks great on snow. I think it really simplifies a lot of cinematography. So there should be more horror Christmas movies.
It really does look good on snow. I mean,
it does.
We got to take that trip to the Black Christmas house, don't we? That might be
we do.
Except the pandemic is now starting to rage again in Ontario.
The fire's roaring one more time.
Yeah. Measures have been introduced.
That's true.
Yeah.
So we're doing it, from separate studios, from separate locations, all trying to hang it together through an Ethernet cable, but we're getting it done.
Yeah, we are.
So should we break the news? Should we show people what's coming here?
I think we're gonna have to, right? I mean, there's no.
I want to introduce y'all to Nickel by Acustica. Eric, you want to tell them what it is?
Sure. Okay. Well, Nickel is based on a very famous FET hardware compressor. And if you were to list the most famous compressors in all of history, and even people just getting into recording, what compressor should I use? This is probably the first one that comes up is the 1176.
Yeah,
and it's got a characteristic sound. It really changed the game when that came out back in I guess it was the late 60s. It was the fastest compressor because it used this new FET technology, and the attack, it could really clamp down. I mean, it still lets a little bit through. For the time, it was like super, and everybody just, and very quickly they discovered if you could get aggressive with it, you could smash drums and bass and vocals, and it just gave this extra sheen and like motion to everything, and aggression and forwardness in the speakers. Brilliant.
Yes. Yeah. So should we walk them through the plugin? Can I show you all the controls and give you a couple of samples? Can I kick it off?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do this.
All right. So here it is. This is Nickel, and it is for those of you who use an 1176 or 1176 plugins, the interface would be somewhat familiar, yet a little more complicated. So just to walk you through, first of all, you can choose between blackface mode, which is the LN mode, or the silverface mode, which is Rev H. You'll notice that in addition to the predictable input and output trim knobs, all of the compression ratios are here underneath the meters. And so the standard 4:1, 8:1, 10 or 12? 10, right? I can't remember. 10, 20, and then all in. So if you click all in, it pushes essentially all of those buttons, creating a closer to infinity type of compression ratio. But in addition to that, we have some usual suspects in terms of attack and release, and counter to perhaps normal plugin architecture. The quicker attacks and releases are to the right, whereas the slower ones are more to the left. We have the attack, what I'll call like the knee control or the attack characteristic control here. We have a low pass filter, which the original unit obviously doesn't feature. And then you can choose between the LN and the Rev H preamps. Doesn't matter which mode you're in, they're both available to you. There's a harmonics dial, and then there's a threshold control, which the original hardware does not feature as well, and a dry wet control, which the original hardware doesn't feature. So there's a couple of groovy tools here, but I think what we should do is listen to it in action. Here's what I've noticed so far, EB, and tell me if you agree. It is it models the tone of the unit very well. It models the distortion of the unit extremely well. You may find you have to tweak the knobs a little bit to try to get the attack curve sounding like an 1176. Now, I'm comparing it here to the universal audio version, which may not sound any more like an 1176, but it is considered one of the gold standards for plugins. So when you A/B them, there's a couple of differences. Eric, how did you find it?
Just what you described there, same deal. Is that I put it on first, and I said, okay, well, if this was a hardware 76, what would I do, right? Okay, I'll speed up the release a bit and do, you know, I just did my usual kind of tricks, and then crank the input up, and I put the output down even in anticipation. And I'm like, no, that's not it. It doesn't sound like that at all. So you got to remember the Acustica does that -18 thing. So the first knob actually that you want to tweak is that SOA knob, the safe operating area, which is, like you said, it's sort of like a threshold. Because the stuff, the really good stuff actually happens kind of at using the full dynamics of the plugin. So you don't send the rule, don't send it something hot and then crank the input. That's not how this one works. So as soon as I turned up that SOA, it just gave, all of a sudden you could hear the compression coming in, the level was getting lower, and now I could crank the input. And like there's the behavior, right? So
there it is, yeah.
And then for the attack, like you were saying, I had to use the SH mod, which is another control on there, and I pulled that down to around 10 o'clock or something, like 4 out of 5, 3.5 out of 5, or whatever. And then like, this is this. And what I also noticed is just the complexity of the envelopes. It's like I have not heard this in a software plugin before, including like Unison, which you know has a lot of dependencies, and it's got 2 envelopes. Now this was more. And when you're really clamping down on something, you hear that extra depth. So hopefully we'll get to demonstrate that as well.
Well, let's do it. So let's try it on some percussion first. So I'm just going to loop some percussion here, so it can be pretty repetitive. Let's listen first without. All right, so there we go. Now, I've made a little preset for you here. Let's have a listen. So what I want you to listen for here, just in its, well, let's jam the input for a second. Let's see what happens when you crank the input. You notice there's no real distortion there yet. Let me turn the preamps all the way off. Drive the input one more time. So even though it's reporting compression here, you can't necessarily hear that real kind of crunch that you might expect. Watch what happens when we kick the preamp in and then jam the harmonics. Now we're starting to get there, right? Gain differences aside, but have a listen for a moment to the hand claps without. Gain differences aside, let me level match that a touch. So let's listen with the compressor out. Kick it in and listen to what happens to the conga or whatever that happens to be, and the claps. You'll hear them lengthen a bit. Listen to the claps especially. Without. With. Without. A noticeable drying up of the signal, right? So let's see what happens when we add a little bit of extra distortion to it. I want you to hear the differences between the LN and the Rev H harmonics. So let's kick it in. Let's jam the harmonics all the way up to the roof. And what you're listening to there are the LN, is the LN distortion. Listen to the Rev H. Listen here for, you should hear something that sounds maybe a little more sawtoothy or a little grittier on the Rev H. You go back to the LN, you might notice it's a little bit smoother, but more importantly, the Rev H is a little more mid-forward. So let's go back to the LN and listen for the smoothness, and then watch what happens when I change them. This is LN. A little crisper, a little bit cleaner, and just a little bit more aggression. Now you'll really hear it on a drum kit. Let's talk about the controls a little bit longer. Here, the input, I'm jamming it pretty hard. I'm going to shut off the preamp for a sec. Notice though that the overs indicator is always on. So what I would recommend is dialing back the input so it doesn't light up quite so much. And then as EB suggested, let's use the threshold control to try to get the compressor to dig in a bit more. So let's have a listen. Right now, notice at 4, not a ton of gain reduction. Let's play with this knob a bit. There we go. Now you can really hear the attack and release kicking in. Shorten that attack. And we've almost got it popping like a DBX. Let's move the release all the way down too, see what happens. Give it a little more threshold. Now it's really starting to pump and jump. This sounds good. I think it's worth, you know what, let me switch to a drum sample.
Oh, wow.
Right, so there's the sound we know and love. Even at 4-to-1 ratio, that's exactly what we want. Now let's pull this down so that, again, I'll pick a different preset here. So it's doing all the wonderful things. If I drive the input harder, ooh, you get that nice bombastic iron sound, right? That clang. That's a beautiful sound. But if you don't want to be driving that those overs too hard, let's watch the indicator here. Now I don't hear anything necessarily bad when those are lighting up, but use your ear. Try and back off them a little bit. So here, listen again for the different types of distortion on the harmonics knob. Crank it up a bit. Listen to the bass drum and the snare. Switch to Rev H. I hear a little more fizzly on that Rev H, and I definitely hear more mid-range. I don't know about you. You want to see what the filter does? This does something that an 1176 can't do. Let's check it out. Let me bring the threshold up a bit. Okay, so check out the filter. You're basically saying leave the bass drum alone. So that's kind of a nice feature, although I think a lot of us who know the 1176 sound kind of want it to operate on the bass drum at the same time. Here's one thing I noticed, big difference between the Universal Audio and this one, is that when you squish a drum kit on the Universal Audio one, you'll end up with a lot of extra extra stuff happening in the low mids, maybe between 120 and 250 somewhere. Can't exactly tell where without giving it a solid listen. You don't get that with this particular plugin. It tends to accentuate the mid-range a little more, which helps make it sound aggressive the way an 1176 should.
Every time you come in here, you're breaking my concentration. You're distracting me.
And as EB was suggesting, you have to play with, if you just play with the default attack and release knee, here with a faster attack and release time, watch what happens. You might hear a little too much swing when the compressor engages. Take a listen. Do you hear it kind of pumping in and out, a little bit of flutter almost, to the point where I heard the snare doubling a touch? In order to counter that, you're going to want to play with the Schmod button here, and I pull it down a little bit below 1 to get a slightly smoother knee, which is more 1176-y. Have a listen. This is at 2. Let's pull it down to 0.5. Watch what happens if we crank it all the way to 4. It's not as grabby. So the compressor isn't working as much. You're going to have to dig into the threshold a little further. One thing you will notice is that this control is very fidgety. Nothing happens. Well, I'll walk you through it. Let's pull the output down. Watch what happens. Okay, so no activity. Start moving it up. No activity. No activity. Bit of activity. Crazy activity. All within this very narrow band. So you do have to play with this a little bit, and once you've found your sweet spot, you can dial back on the input, dial back on the harmonics, jack the output a little bit, play with the Schmod control a bit. And here we have something far more aggressive and smacky. Let's try the 20 or the, sorry, let's try the all-in feature. Some heavy-duty compression there. Look at that. Let's try listening in LN mode, blackface mode.
Oh, wow.
Ooh. Super aggressive compression, right? You totally are going to have to change your settings here. Pull back the input. Pull back the threshold a touch. I might even change the harmonics. And let me get that filter disengaged. Now be mindful, there's no, at least in this release, there's no Schmod control for the blackface. And what I also noticed about this first release is you'll find the release button's a little sticky. It's almost like it's detented or stepped. So see me trying to move it here, and it is sliding back to one of these two positions. So it's not really continuously variable. So that may change in a future release. I'm not exactly sure, but that's my run through. I mean, on drums and everything. I mean, one last thing I could show you, I guess, is what would this do to a 2-track mix? So allow us to hear, if we shut off the preamp, we would probably get rid of a lot of the distortion. And so maybe we could pull this off. Let's see what happens on with a 4:1 ratio. No filter engaged, medium attack and release. Let's see what we could do to this. Let's see what we could do to this finished 2-track stereo mix. Here's without. Let's drive the input a little bit and pull down the threshold a little bit. Have a listen. In. That's obviously too much. Let's go without. Ooh. It's doing some nice stuff to the mid-range, to all of those, the tambourines. It's really moving them around in the stereo image, but it's messing up the low end. Let's put a filter in at maybe 75 and have a listen. Okay, so without, I'm going to start around here. Let's kick it in. Listen to the snare. Without. With. Still a little too aggressive, maybe. Off. And in. Could you use it as a mix bus compressor? I suppose. Are there better choices? Most definitely. But the point is, unlike a real 1176, you're kind of a slave to the harmonics. As they pop up, there's nothing you can do to get rid of them if you don't want them. Whereas with this tool, you could. And you could filter out that bottom end, and we could also parallel mix it. We could pull the wet control back a bit and let more of the original signal through and come up with something that's maybe just right for a mix. But honestly, this is going to shine on drums. So that's my time. EB, rock it.
Rock and roll, man. That sounded great. Look, when you went to when you switched to the LN, I didn't explore the LN as much, and I'm like, oh, there's a sound there that we all know.
Oh yeah, but you can't control the attack curve, and it's not exactly like, to me, an 1176 has a really smooth knee. Right? It doesn't do kind of gradually, or it doesn't duck down and then recover in a way that pumps. It is a much smoother, like when it's on, it's very much like a limiting amp and it's on. So it creates, on a snare, it creates a smoother smush. This one creates like a splat, unless you go back to the Silverface mode and play with the Schmod control. So just be warned.
I only played with a Silverface. However, what I also did play with, and I'll get my screen up here, was the Equalizer, which we didn't even mention yet. This comes
That's right.
with a full Equalizer. It's based on the Uri filter set. Those were great units. I mean, I remember one of them had like a notch filtering function on it, so you could take out resonances, presumably feedback or whatever. But this is a solid sounding Equalizer. I'm loving it. And then of course the compressor. So those would be your two plugins in the set, the EQ and the compressor. You get them both. But let me just play with the Equalizer. I've got also a set of drums here. Play it for you dry. Let's turn on the EQ. Let's let it get going here. Yeah, it just fills out the bottom. There's just a bit of low and high, but I'll play with it for you now a bit. And there we go. Okay, so let's give it some, what am I doing here? I think that's the low end. I turned that on. Let's just crank up that low a bit. Hear how much you've got available and how tight it is. This is like your classic 70s kind of solid state sound. Very accurate, very tight. Listen to that, just down there. Switch through the... And of course you can get into the mids if you want. I like that kind of around 40, 50, maybe 60. Actually, that's catching nice. Let's take down the gain. Let's widen it out. Let's widen it to where we don't hear the mids as much. Maybe just a little bit of them. That's pretty nice. Let's take this off. On. And I think there's also a very wide boost way at the top. Let's hear what that was doing. Oh yeah. Let's see, let me bypass the high. Now let me narrow that up a bit, just so you can hear what the filters do. I'm going to sweep through a bit. They really nail the sound of these filters. It's just so... Let's really grab some of those cymbals. Let's widen this out. Off. Hear the sheer quantity of high end being added there. Well, maybe let's just go like this. And let's see what we had going on for the compressor. I'll leave the EQ on. Let's turn on the compressor. Right? You can hear the room.
You totally can, and that's the 1176. I mean, that's what it does better than, except for the distressor maybe. I would say it's probably the best that there ever was in nuking the room.
Oh, it's better.
It is, yeah. Okay. I would also point out that traditionally Acustica compressors have left some of the fun out of compression. They do the job of compression, but because compression is hard to sample, right? EQ curve's easy to sample. It's here's what it looked like going in, here's what it looked like coming out. But with compression, you're dealing with time. And anytime you're dealing with time, that's a little bit hard to model accurately and quickly. So what I'm noticing about this particular plugin is that this one is fun. This is a fun compressor. This does what you hope an 1176 would do.
Oh, it does, yeah. And compared to the hardware, I mean, my memories of the hardware are fading day by day. I mean, we're talking a decade, I think, since I actually had my hands on one, but I mean, this is close as I think you get in plugin world, and frankly, when I compared this to some of my other ones that I had been going to, those came out a little bit disappointing compared to this. I think just because of the flexibility, but you do have to get to know those controls, the SH mod, the SOA. That's the ticket. The ticket is not slamming this with a hot level. The ticket's like actually maybe pulling that back and just seeing. You can always make up the gain at the end, right? And that's I think where you really start to get those realistic actions happening.
Yes, so it's the SOA gives you the compression itself, whereas I find the input knob gives you more of the tone and the aggression of the 1176. So this big warning, this won't out of the box behave like the 1176 that, you know, the hardware one that you have in your head. You're going to have to play with those controls a little bit, schmod, input, distortion or harmonics, and the SOA or threshold control to get where you want to get to. Yeah,
absolutely. And we were just talking with Giancarlo, and they talked about how they're using AI to model these compressors because that Acustica technology, you know, in the beginning, it's great for EQs. The compressors were like, they're getting so much better now. And it's a lot of information, I think, just to properly capture all that program dependency that a compressor has, right? It's not just how loud it is and how quiet it is. It's like, how loud was it 5 seconds ago? How loud was it 30 seconds ago in some cases? And all of that stuff just built up. That's your program, you know, dependent, and what was the frequency content. And I hear that complexity in this compressor. And more so even than like some of these algorithmic, it's all algorithms, but some of these one like unisums, that can get very complex, but this is still, when it's clamped down, I hear it like moving, you know, in a way that I don't know if I've ever heard it in a plugin before. Maybe the UAD does can do that.
Yeah, it does very much so. And like I said, the big difference is that the knee is smoother and instantaneous. Even on a slowish attack, you don't get that dip and recover. With a slam and threshold, it's very immediate. And also that low mid or low mud that it creates it's as a compression artifact. Not only can you not filter it out inside the plugin, of course, but it's in a different spot. It's lower down in the range. And I don't know which one's more accurate, but I do like a lot about the Acustica one seems to bring it in the mid-range to move things forward with some real aggression that you'd want this compressor to give you.
Yeah, I mean, and the EQ is great too. That's the way I remember those units, just not the particular frequencies, they were just the way that it feels. There's that certain lineage of high-end solid state that you know, the Neve desks have it, the API desks have it, and this stuff has it. But this one's you know, it's a little funkier almost. I almost get reminded a little bit of, remember Moog Music? They had that filter set, which was really extreme, right? You could push it farther, and that, like I feel a little bit of that with this. You know, as well as the classic Uri, by the way, that's how you spell it.
Right.
Uri, because it's, I forgot, but it actually stands for something, Electrical Institute, or,
right.
So it's Uri.
I read that once. Yeah.
So let me do a couple quick examples, because what else do you use the 1176 for? Well, I think bass and vocals. So I've got one of each.
You talking to me? You talking to me? I'm the only one here.
Rock vocal, rock bass, they're already kind of distorted, but let's see if we squeeze some more out of it. All right. Fucking freak! Got checked out on the power trip, but you know that's goddamn wake! Let me pull this down. The world's on fire. Let's just smash it. Sticking you in, licking it up, and you'll know that you'll do it again. Yeah, do it again. The world's on fire. Sucking you in, licking it up, and you know that you'll do it again. Do it again. Let's set this up CLA style. Fucking freak! Got checked out on the power trip, but you know that's goddamn wake. The world's on fire. Sticking you in, licking it up, and you'll know that you'll do it again. Yeah, do it again. The world's on fire. Sucking you in, licking it up, and you know that you'll do it again. Do it again. You hear that harmonics now? Fucking freak! Got checked out on the power trip, but you know that's goddamn wake. The world's on fire. Sticking you in, licking it up, and you'll know that you'll do it again. Yeah, do it again. The world's on fire. Sucking you in, licking it up, and you know that you'll do it again. Do it again. I'm getting that much distortion, and notice also that the SOA light is not going off. Fucking freak! Got checked out on the power trip, but you know that's goddamn wake. We could maybe make it go off. The world's on fire. Sticking you
drive.
Licking it up, and you'll know that you'll do it again. Yeah, do it again. The world's on fire. Sucking you in. I like it up near the top, right? Because it, I don't know, you just get more room out of it that way, I think. And the distortion, you're not going to get any less distortion if you keep all the levels low surrounding it, kind of thing. Obviously, I went over zero there.
If you want to hit the overloads, you're going to push the input a little higher. Yours is below 0.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to hit it harder, you could do that. But yeah, I love the way it brings the room out. And the breath. Your breaths in between the phrases, all of a sudden they're like in your face, which is, again, real characteristic characteristic of that era, right? And that genre.
Oh, yeah. Let me cue up another example here. This will be for bass, already distorted. And here it is dry. The first thing I'm going to do, and actually let me get... get us in there. So first thing I'm going to do right off the bat, this is way too hot to be doing an Acustica. That's way too hot to be doing anything Acustica with. They want -18, give them -18. Don't reinvent the wheel. Okay, so there, we got that. We can turn it up later. So next up, let's engage the equalizer. Let me just kind of zero these out a bit. Let's add some low. No, don't need to add low. Because you know, part of the problem with adding a low end to bass is like, okay, if you set it at 110, you're gonna get A note. And then A's are gonna be louder than everything else, right? So if you can avoid it, just don't. You know, use the compressor for, use the high pass on the compressor detector. But you know what I do want? I want a bit of that snarl. Let me narrow this up so I really get that frequency there on the nose. Oh yeah, there we go. This is, it's one of these two probably. Depends which flavor you want. And also when you have a mix, where it's gonna fit.
Yeah, what's gonna make it pop?
If you want that brighter, more modern sound, you go up into like the 3K. And if you want that grit, dirty, you know, to me that lives around 1.5.
Yep.
So let's widen that out. Let's not add as much of that. So now we got kind of a like Getty sound or something. There's a lot of top and mid presence, not a huge amount of low, but we can fix that with the compressor here. So let's pull this back. 4 to 1. Let's slow it down a bit, especially on the attack. And let's start giving it more gain. Wow, it's a lot of compression. Now
it's filling up the bottom end too.
Here's the filter. There's our magic. And we can make up the gain. So I'll turn off all of it. It's not volume match, so I'm going to get some flack for that, but whatever. This is what it's like when you're actually mixing and not using the I want to see what you can do up there without all the assistance. But for those that would like it matched, you can probably oblige. Okay, so that's probably about level matched. But look at the meters.
Yep.
Without it, that's like 3 dB less that I have, right? You get. I hope people are starting to get what been trying to say all year. So sounds the same level, but you don't. You're gonna have to turn this up. Whereas with dry, you're gonna have to turn it down to fit it in the mix, right? So let's turn that up to actually match level-wise. And you can also do this, of course, with lifts meters and stuff, and you can do it with VUs. And you can also do it in your mix and hear how present something is in your mix, which is ultimately the way you should be deciding levels. So let's hear that. Still more level on the dry. This is about what it sounds like in terms of how it would fit in a mix. Right?
Yep.
That's how much more push you have at the same peak and same peak level. So I love it. And of course you can crank into it if you really want to distort it. If it's that kind of day. Yeah, a little bit farty there, so maybe not so much of that, but a little bit of fart you're not going to hear in the mix. But, you know, you could go for that if that's your thing.
Yep.
Right? So, let's hear what the attack. Doesn't seem to get hurt as much by moving the attack. And then the other thing I'm curious about is the LN and how that would treat it. Oh, now get some SOA lights. Don't want that. Different distortion.
Very.
That's really cool. For certain kind of, I mean, it's all artistic choices at that point, right? And
it is. It's like two different grits of sandpaper. Literally, one's a bit smoother, and the other one's a little more jagged or a little more toothy. But they both get the job done, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That is very cool. So in sum, the verdict is, out of the box, you're not getting exactly 1176 behavior. You're going to have to play with some of those controls and see how they interact to get something that you like. Schmod of 2 will give you a knee or an attack curve that's very bouncy, very spongy. If you want something more 1176-esque, you're going to have to play around with it, realizing that as you go towards 0, you'll get what I feel is a little more immediate. But as you go towards, I think, 3 and 4, it sounds like more of the original signal comes through, which means the attack is maybe a bit slower, potentially. But I haven't read the manual, so I can't say for certain. So you're going to have to play with it a little bit. Don't just go straight to the input control because it doesn't do everything you want. It needs to interact with those preamps and the harmonic distortion to really get the flavor that you want. And be careful of that SOA control. It's got a very narrow band in which you go from not doing anything to doing a lot. So you're going to have to feather it a bit. And try the different modes. LN is obviously, sounds a little more modern. It's a little more squishier. Whereas the LN, or sorry, the Silverface one, the Rev E or H, can't remember.
Yeah, H.
The Rev H seems to be a little more mid-forward and a little more aggressive and a little more of the tonal character maybe that you would think of when you think of a classic unit.
Yeah, I never got into the subtleties with the hardware and the different models. And like at the time, I didn't care what was what, but I knew you could get that kind of compression. This distortion, frankly, goes beyond. And what you're saying about the SOA is true. And I'm starting to think that the way you might want to handle that is move the SOA because, you're moving it up, you're not hearing any change. And then all of a sudden, boom, you're hearing a change. I'm starting to wonder, that's the sign that you're there, that you've set that control properly. Leave it. Once you hear that change, leave it, and then tweak all the other dials.
Drive the input. Yep, yeah, that's it. That's what I do. So set the SOA first so that it's compressing and it's getting the character that you want. Do you want smash? Do you want subtle squish? And then use the input controls and the distortion to dial in the flavor. And don't forget about the ratio, obviously. You got to check your ratio as well.
Yeah, of course. Really good. Really great plugin.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I adore the sound of this.
And I know you fans of this unit have been waiting for Acustica to release a version for a long time now. So here it is. Enjoy, man.
Got it, man.
Yeah.
Well, I think that sums it up nicely. We've got.
I think so too.
We've got the holidays to look forward to, kids. So go out and make some snow angels and bring your cleaver. Right, it helps with the overall. You're not doing it so much for yourself, but for the people walking by, right? So,
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's right. All right. Well, happy holidays, and I don't know. Maybe we'll be back up here before or not. I don't know. But
hard to say.
Not,
but check this plugin out.
Yeah, definitely check it out. Acustica. It's going to be on sale as always. Introductory offer, and. Yeah, I don't think you'll be disappointed because you get the compressor and the EQ. And the compressor is like, yeah, go ahead, go to town, put that up against any of the other compressors you've got in the box. And I mean, I think you're going to find it's like, it's in the ballpark. It's there, So yeah, good on them. They've got a compressor now that I just really, really look forward to using this more and more. So.
Same.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Leave your comments below as always, and we'll see you next time on the Mixorcist.